Hey Cam,
Yeah, Darren, no, it's good to be here.
thanks for being here.
Yeah, no worries. My father was a football administrator, very well known. He was the secretary of the Richmond Football Club, which is the same type of role during their great era. And he always, it became almost a father-son thing. That was the thing that we shared perhaps more than anything was, and he communicated through the game. Almost his lessons on life came through the game, and we'd have conversations about footy, which perhaps even as a 12 or a 13-year-old, which were quite unique. I was probably just thinking that perhaps maybe that could be something that I'd get to do one day. You know, immediately my head space changed, that I thought, yeah, well, what does it actually now mean to do that role compared with the role that I was actually doing? And I thought, you know, I think I can take that step. Even though I'm clearly young, the thing that I needed to be most experienced in, I actually was. There was gaps everywhere, as it turned out, but from a personal confidence point of view, I felt that it wasn't, it wasn't a step too far. There'd probably be people who would have questioned it, but within myself, I felt capable. That's a really good question. I think even on my reflection is that I probably spent too long thinking of it as something other than actually what it was. And what I mean by that is I felt a need to be and behave and respond in a way that I expected of the role rather than what I should have expected of myself. So what would people expect of the role rather than what would they expect of this person in that role? I was very concerned about coming over as being young and soft and naive and these sorts of things. So perhaps I over-represented myself in the areas that I was worried that people might see me as. And that was an error because I think I probably had enough of what I needed. I had enough leverage in what I'd actually done, even though I was young, to actually build a leadership basis of. But I tried to leverage something that I wasn't. But I knew enough about numbers to say that we can't do what we need to do as a business. And this was at a time when interest rates for businesses were around 20%, like just extraordinary when you think about it now. And we had to make a choice at that stage. Are we prepared to kill the Richmond Football Club? And we did. And we had a thing called the SOS, Save Our Skin campaign during that period of time. And we raised $1.7 million in 6 weeks. And that effectively wiped it out of the club, and the club was able to go forward. There's always this terrifying thought that you're going to get found out as a fraud, or as there's something about you which is going to get, someone's going to, come into your office one day and say, look, we actually made a mistake, you're not a real CEO. There's this, almost that sits with you the whole time, even 25 years into it. And I did get sacked a couple of times, so people did actually say that to me. So I was lucky to go to Harvard for a few months. I did my MBA, I did a marketing master's, I did an ethical leadership program at the Melbourne Business School. I did some really cool stuff, but not much which related specifically to what I did. And that's that feeling that when you wake up in the morning and you go, well, whatever happens today, it's actually ultimately my responsibility. But you also know that there's actually only so much control you're ever going to have over what's going to happen in that day. That little gap is a really interesting space. And it's set up for CEOs, for founder CEOs, for directors of organisations who are ultimately the responsible person in that organisation. And the place it comes from is that this need for the leader and the CEO in this case to honour the role, to honour this responsibility that they've got. It's no longer about their ambition, even though their ambition needs to stay high, but their ambition as it relates to the organisation, and their personal ambition needs to be aligned to that, otherwise you get incongruency, and that's one of the things we talk about in the course. Some people might say, okay, no, it's about the profit we can create, or it's about the amount of stuff we can make, or whatever it might be. Yeah, I get all that. That's important in terms of your reason why you're around, but it's got to come back to your people, always. And if you get honour and belief, I think you're a chance of then getting trust and being able to retain trust, and that's personal trust, organisational trust, a whole lot of things related to that. So honour, belief as it relates to trust. Say people like yourself, you've come up with an idea. We think this idea is a good idea. the idea stays the idea, but then you actually work out there's a whole lot of other things going on here. That once it transforms beyond the energy of the idea, now you're running a business and you may be employing people and you may be having expectations beyond what your own vision for this thing actually is. They're the most important, because often people then go, I'm not sure if I'm up for that now. Who's the leader you seek to be in all of this? And I can almost guarantee there's enough leverage and know-how in that person to become that. The best leaders I've dealt with are obviously capable people, but they're capable because of the great habits they've built, rather than necessarily the pure talent that they have. They may look to a Steve Jobs or an Elon Musk or whatever and say, well, I'm not one of them, so how can I actually be that? Well, whereas those people are quite idiosyncratic in their own way, they've created a leadership model which works for them, and they've complemented themselves with really capable people. So they mightn't bring the complete game, but they create, as best they can, complete teams to fulfill. And I think I can't remember who said this, but it's a beautiful quote. It says, the most creative thing you can actually do is create a team of people who can deliver your vision. That's almost the most creative thing you can actually do. And that's a lovely notion, because it goes beyond the creativity of the original idea and now becomes something bigger than that. It's the creativity you can, and that beautiful feeling when you're in a group, when you've created a group of people who just get what you're trying to do, and they like each other, they work well each other, they've got sort of good collegiality, but they've got high levels of accountability. All that stuff's happening for them. You've got to go deep before you go forward. We have so much momentum in our lives, the momentum of your good idea. I love the idea, I love this business, so therefore I'm going to create a momentum behind that. And the idea, that'll keep it going for a period of time, but it might actually have a life of its own if you're not careful. The two words I used before, honour and belief. Honour and belief. They're the two words I always come back to as a leader, for me personally. It might be something else, it'll be something different for someone else. But to go back and find those words for me was a very powerful thing. And so I'd say to yourself, okay, tell me in time, tell me what your words will be. And most people are, I'm not sure. Okay, so therefore let's spend some time going deep. Let's find out. And then once you actually have that, wherever the momentum takes you, you'll know whether it's the right momentum or not. You'll actually know this is in fact time to pull back off this. So we only have 12 people do the program at any one time, and that's quite deliberate. So people don't get lost in the numbers at any time. So you get to see someone else's revelation and then go, well, how does that relate to me? And sometimes that revelation comes with a fair bit of emotion and a lot of tears, because all of a sudden something makes sense. There's a beautiful making sense thing, where you just go, I've just learned something about myself that was there all the time, Yep. And that's a really cool feeling. Is that hour and a half we have each morning where people are just giving their reflections on what the day before was, and to see that actually happen, and then realise that people are on the cusp of making some very important changes as leaders in their lives, and that's grouse. That's a cool feeling, and that for me was the very thing that I wanted as a leader. I wanted that experience, and to be able to give that I feel quite privileged. I think it's an Arianna Huffington, I think I heard her say it, but her mother once told her that our failures are our stepping stones to success, and it's a beautiful bit of parenting, but it's also a fantastic thought for leaders, that we're going to fail a lot, and what do we get from it? I think almost whenever I'm faced with any situation, I come back to an Alan Jeans quote. Almost any time. Alan Jeans is a very important person in my life, but he had a couple, and I use one a lot, which is, it's not how you get knocked down, it's how you get up. It's not how you get knocked down, it's how you get up. It's a very powerful, and he delivered it to me personally in a very, it's something which stayed with me forever. It's something where our wisdom comes from our failure as much as anything, but you only get the wisdom if you're prepared to pick yourself back up. He also had a lovely little saying, is your first loss is your best loss. That if you're facing up to something, it's better to make that choice now. Just face up, and we can think that that's going to be difficult. We think it's going to be harder, but generally the problem's only going to get harder still if we don't face up.
Thank you, Cam. Thanks for talking to us.
Cheers.
Champion.